Shabbat Shalom. This week I come to you having graduated from my bunker studio downstairs in the basement. My family is out of town, and during the week earlier, at the beginning of the week, we adopted a new puppy because life is not complicated enough. And so with my family out of town, having traveled to Connecticut for the July 4th celebration, I've decided that I should stick around to see what chaos is wrought, and that it's not safe for me to be down in the basement where the puppy wouldn't like it and would climb into way too many things. So instead, I'm letting her climb into way too many things on the first floor, and I'm hoping for the best technologically, that this will work out and that the recording and upload will all go okay, and that you won't hear anything crashing in the background. So just so that you know, this is Maisie. This is the newest member of our family. She is 8 weeks old, a bearded collie, and we hope that things go very well. So once again, Shabbat Shalom. A few years ago, on this Shabbat of Shabbat Chukkat-Balak, we mentioned how this double parasha is a turning point in the Torah. At the beginning of Numbers chapter 20, which is read this Shabbat, the Jewish people in the desert find themselves without water. So they complained to Moses and to Aaron. If only we had died with the death of our brothers before the Lord. Why have you brought the congregation of the Lord to this desert so that we and our livestock should die here? Why have you taken us out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of sin. Why have you taken us out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place for seeds or fig trees or grapevines or pomegranate trees, and there's no water to drink. Well, the question that I asked you a couple years ago is, doesn't this sound a little bit familiar? Haven't we heard similar words and complaints before? Perhaps it evokes the episode back in the book of Exodus, shortly after the Jews first leave Egypt, where it is written in Exodus 17:2, there was no water for the people to drink. So the people quarreled with Moses and they said, give us water that we may drink. Why have you brought us up from Egypt to make me and my children and my livestock die of thirst? So these two complaints sound similar, right? In both instances, we've got the people setting up camp, they want water, and they complain to Moses. But one of the critical differences between these parallel moments of protest is a very subtle detail that our sages reveal to us. They look closely at the text and they notice that there's an extremely important and subtle, almost date stamp on this Shabbat's text. The fine details of this Shabbat's text reveal to us that when this Shabbat's words are spoken, the generation that had left Egypt had already died out in the desert. And that now we are looking at a whole new generation, a generation of Israelites who will enter the land of Israel. And the clue to this difference is when they say it is not a place for seeds or fig trees or grapevines or pomegranate trees, because these features are not a reference to Egypt. They never were in earlier texts. They are a reference to the land of Israel, and they echo the various fruits that the spies reported finding in the land of Israel just recently in our reading. So therefore, the Israelites who protest in this Shabbat's reading in the book of Numbers are not the same Israelites that protested back in the book of Exodus. So, on the one hand, I want to welcome and introduce you to a new generation in the Torah. This is the generation that gets to take home the big prize and all expenses paid homeland that is flowing with milk and honey. But on the other hand, I also would like us to take just a moment and to consider what it must have been like to be the generation that didn't make it. Now, these are the people who were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. These are the ones who risked leaving there. They crossed the Sea of Reeds, and these are the ones who fought enemies in the desert because God made a promise to them. And granted, they messed up over and over. They fetched, they moaned, they complained. Their faith was weak. They built a golden calf. And then, as we learned last week, they gave in. They submitted to pessimism. They gave up hope that they'd ever really be able to succeed in the Holy Land. And they valued the negative report of 10 spies over the word of God. Indeed, they were the ones who gave up on the promise of Israel, not God. So that in the end, God said to them, "You don't want to go to Israel? Don't go. But I'm not taking you back to Egypt either." And yet, how can we not at least have a little compassion for them? No one likes to fail, even when they are the cause of their own failure. And what a bitter demise these people, this generation that left Egypt, has brought upon itself. In anticipation of this country's 244th Independence Day celebration this weekend, I read the Declaration of Independence for the first time ever at the beginning of the week. To tell the truth, there are certain aspects of it that I was quite unaware of. Number one, I thought it began, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," and didn't know that's not the first paragraph, that's the second paragraph, but that the first paragraph really is "when in the course of human events." So that is my first ignorant misgiving. My second, well, this isn't necessarily about ignorance. We can speak about my ignorance some other time. I was struck by, it's about my ignorance. I was struck by how the document contains a list of charges against King George III. It's a miracle that the British were ever allowed to open even an embassy in this country after that. And third, when reading about the promises of what the United States would be, I had goosebumps. I had goosebumps because it struck me all over again, although this time in a much more profound way than before. What a privilege it is for me to have entered this land as an immigrant and to be a part of this revolutionary, historic experiment. I was shocked, though, to read not just the language, but the attitude towards the so-called merciless Indian savages, and really couldn't help wondering how different that might be written, if at all, had the document been written just recently in recent years, months, or weeks. But most of all, I was saddened after reading the Declaration of Independence when later this week I read some of Douglas's letters, which cast such a different light on the Declaration of Independence, not only in his day, but still in ours. How could it be that the Declaration overlooked and failed to mention America's original sin of slavery? How could it be that this document would pave the way for a society in which certain rights would not be unalienable for certain people? And how could it be that almost 2.5 centuries later, the argument still needs to be made that Black lives matter? Was it because Black people who were brought to America against their will one day announced, as did the generation of Israelites who left Egypt, thanks, but no thanks. It's okay, really. We'll pass. We've actually quite embraced this whole slavery experience and don't aspire to any kind of equality. I don't think that they gave up on the opportunity. We know that's not the case. Rather, we know that in our American history, the failure to extend the rights of individuals to all individuals came from the failure to recognize all individuals as individuals deserving of rights. And as the country in which I grew up learned about itself, when it decided the time had come to truly usher in a new era, those who have sinned cannot really be forgiven until they have come to own what they have done, before we own how we have benefited from unfair advantages accorded to us merely by virtue of our color. And we have looked those who've been forgotten by history in the eye and told them that we truly are sorry. Whether we were born here or whether we come from other shores, we are blessed to live in such a magnificent country. It is our responsibility as Americans to remember what our country emerged from, not just this weekend of the 4th of July, but every weekend and every week and every day. To remember why it emerged from its previous condition. It is our responsibility to take stock of this country's failings thus far. And God willing, we should be privileged enough to have the chance to work side by side with all Americans to build a more perfect union in the future. Shabbat Shalom.